Yeah.
I love my HBCU. And boy, I love it, love it. I love it, love it. I love my HBCU.
And man,
I hope my team they won.
Yeah.
I hope my team they won.
yeah, man,
I hope my team they won.
Yeah.
I hope my team they won.
yeah.
I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab to see if my team won or lost. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, keep tab. I'ma do the dab, yeah. Dr. Cavil, he know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with this hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they won or lost, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach.
This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. Mike Washington is here, back in the building. How's it going, Mike?
I'm fine, Doc. How you doing?
Man, we get Mike back, and then Charles skips out. Charles Bishop on assignment.
Something about the heat. Something about heat here in Houston.
Yeah, just make people explode and blow up. I tell you, disappear. But we do have none other than A.D. Drew in the building. How's it going, A.D.?
What's going on, fellas? What's going on? I am so happy to see Mike back for this discussion that we gonna have today. I need that second wheel so that we can go at you, Dr. Cavil. You know, we gotta have that second wheel.
We're gonna get into some data matrix today, analytics. We're gonna nerd out. Hopefully we don't bore our viewers too much, but we have lab listeners. We have folks that are prepared and ready for this, so I'm sure they'll get into it and break it down as we get to going as well. We have Brandon King on here, a new young fella coming in the building. So we're going to nerd him out and see what he thinks as he writes about a lot of this. So we're going to see what he thinks about some of this data numbers representing the independence with Tennessee State. I started to throw you over there with the Aggies. It might be a little too much for you to come in. How you doing today?
Pretty good. How's everybody doing?
Doing good. I see you got your exercise in the background, so you're going to make sure we're going to make us look bad. You're going to let everybody know that you stay in the States.
Man, that ain't no but a prop. He put that up there for the show. It's like, I'm going to be on the show. Let me look like I was.
Hey, Mike, what you say? Turn around and blow and watch the dust fly.
Exactly.
that ain't the powder. That ain't the powder for your hands, y'all.
Yeah, I know the truth. That's for his son in competition. He just
okay.
I know.
Oh, okay. I
Welcome
thought
to episode 4
thought it was
of
one of them new screensavers.
Sports Lab Radio Show and podcast on the show that's covering the sporting HBCU data, all things HBCU sports for institutions large and small, from the NEIA to the NCAA. We share insights and information on the HBCU sports culture, HBCU athletic aesthetics to facilitate the story of HBCU athletic programs in the business of HBCU sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, along with my co-host, Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. As I said, Charles Bishop is out on assignment. We have A.D. Drew, young gun in here, Brandon King, representing for the masses, but we're filming from our home studios and sending a signal live to our KCOH 1230 AM studios with the Texas Radio Hall of Fame. Ralph Cooper in a beautiful home with Texas Southern University from Houston, Texas. With that being said, I did want to give a little update. You've heard about our partnership with Teach Appreciation and Stride Network. So I wanted to say, and we'll revisit this even more, but I want to inviting first teachers or current teachers interested in new approaches to pedagogy. You can go to the site, mybcsn.net/watch/strides to find out more information on Stride. So we'll give you a little more about how you can actually get to it. But for now, if you want to check it out after the show, go to mybcsn.net/watch/stride. And again, I'll give it to you before the end of the show with a little more information there. With that being said, I'm going to go to you, Mike, since you're back in the building. Tell us a little bit about what hot news is on your mind this week in the HBCU sports world.
Man, I got this all over my social media. I know there's a huge FAMU network that I'm a part of, and it was on LinkedIn. I see also I got to give credit to HBCU Sports, but a Florida A&M grad has been named Nike vice president. I believe his name is G. Scott Uzel. So he's been evidently named Vice President, General Manager for North America for Nike Inc. This is significant. I'll give him that. He was previously over at President and CEO of Converse, and he was responsible for all aspects of the business globally and successfully. He's had got a good record. He received his MBA from the University of Chicago. He got his bachelor's degree from that itty bitty bitty school in Tallahassee that does the little snake sound. But he's a good young man. He led the identification and development of a portfolio of high growth brands for the Coca-Cola company. And if you look at his resume, even on LinkedIn, he's got a true background for business, including stints with Cocoa Water, Fairlife Milk, Suji Juice, all kinds of business entities. So congratulations to him, but congratulations to an HBCU alum who's made it to the top of one of the most well-known sports agencies in that night. So even though he's from that little itty bitty 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 school in Tallahassee who claims to sit on a hill and does the snake sounds, congratulations to him.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff. 80 Drew, since he's picking on the other hill, as he likes to call it, itty bitty, I don't know what's that about. I'm gonna give you the next segment so you can give us some HBCU sports news that you want to share.
I need to correct a couple of things. It's not the itty bitty hill, Mike. It's the highest of 7 hills. Make sure you say that and put some respect on that name, bro, brother.
Oh, it's gonna be a good one today. Hey, Brandon, follow it off, man. I don't know how you gonna follow all this.
Oh, God.
All right. As I come to you from Seattle, Georgia, and I'm calling it Seattle, Georgia now because it's rained for about 19 of the last 20 days. You know, I thought I moved to the south, not to the northwest. Anyway, let's stay on the FAMU thing, everybody. Florida A&M's Josh Padilla was named the SWAC SID of the year. And this comes from SWAC.org. They named him the SID of the year. This was voted upon by the league's sports information directors. Let's get a little bit of Josh's background. He oversaw the traditional and digital media for Florida A&M this past season. He led the Rattlers to another season of multi-million interaction via Florida A&M social media platforms. Under his leadership, FAMU has had several video projects garner attention on a national scale. Padilla has nominated 6 individual league award winners, in addition to nominating 31 all SWAC selections. Florida A&M earned a weekly honor in 13 sports this past academic year. Padilla served as a primary media contact for the athletics department, working with multiple national media outlets, including the New York Times, ESPN, ABC, CBS, and NBC. I think we got them all covered right there. And
Yes,
and speaking of Nike, Mike, he's also worked with Nike on promoting FAMU shoe release campaigns and worked with LeBron James Media Company Uninterrupted on a mini documentary which covered the Florida A&M football program.
I saw that. Yeah, he's all right. He's okay. Yeah.
Good stuff, 80 Drew. Man, don't let Mike get into you. We're going to get in these numbers before both of you. Brandon, what HBCU sports news of the day that's on your mind?
Well, despite my feelings about the OVC, they've made it to 75 years, and they just put out their 75th anniversary team. And
did you have to start it off with that?
Yeah.
I thought we were going for a
Man, you talk about one heck of a disclaimer.
See what kind of business y'all do to our young folks out there. That's why you got to be right. Look at it, man. Go ahead, Brandon.
I believe in coming in hot.
I see.
But they put out their 75 anniversary football team, and and there was 11 Tennessee State representatives on there. Now I'm just going to go through them. Of course, if you want more detail, you can go to my article at HBCUsports.com and check it out. So I'll just give you the names here. That was, yes, shameless plug. We've got
I like it.
Was a running back from 1996 to 1998. Charles Anthony, running back from 2001 to 2004. Anthony Bass, linebacker, 2011 to 2014. Kadeem Edwards, offensive lineman from 2009 to 2013. Rico Council, defensive back from 2007 to 2011. Another DB, Randy Fuller from 1990 to 1993. Michael German, quarterback, 2011 to 2014. Defensive lineman, Anthony Pleasant from 1987 to 1989. Chris Rowland, wide out and / return specialist from 2016 to 2019. Running back Javaris Williams, 2005 to 2008. Dominique Rogers Cromartie, defensive back from 2004 to 2007. And among the coaches that was named was Coach L.C. Cole.
It's pretty big stuff. Good stuff. Good shout out to you, Tennessee State Tigers. I like how you did that. OVC besides that. We'll get in a little more stuff about OVC and get into some data and see your metrics in regards to that. I want to go a little bit off the beaten path just because of the connection it had. And as a Houston person by Prairie View, Texas guy already, sad news for those that are in the hip-hop, particularly in regards to the death of Big Pokey, Houston rapper named Milton Powell. He died on Sunday in Beaumont, just outside of Houston. And he was part of a conglomerate in terms of the Screwed Up Clique that really changed and pioneered Houston hip-hop and rap far beyond when Mike and I was listening with the Fifth Ward Boys. And
Inside wave, going out. Big Pokey.
Exactly. With the Ghetto Boys and the like, we kind of get into it. And then as we
go on face.
Yeah, already. You know how we say it around these parts. But he sadly died. He was 48. He passed out on the stage as he was doing an event as part of the Juneteenth weekend. But the HBCU connection, and you can read this even more for those that are not as familiar with it, but those that celebrate the band certainly know about Tuskegee's well-produced and well-known Barlin Parlay. That was his song. His last record called Hardest Pit in the Litter, which is one of the ones that I enjoyed in terms of he came back out, putting it out there. But yeah, that Ball and Parlay, the Marching Crimson Pipers of Tuskegee University, Drew, as you know, really set a lot of folks off and had a lot of folks that really liked when they would hit it up. And that was not just SIAC fans or Division II fans. That were HBCU fans and fans at large that would really celebrate that. So just wanted to give a moment and make sure we acknowledge those that cut across the platforms and just how big the HBCU sporting diaspora, as I like to talk about it, the HBCU sports culture is, and how it connects so many people in so many different ways. So rest in peace to Big Pokey and to all his fans, family members, and the like out of the greater Houston. Rest in peace in terms of that. I also wanted to get into.
Can I say something on that right quick,
sure.
Dr. Cavil, on Big Pokey? Talk about that Ball and Parlay song. I've heard over here in the state of Georgia, I've heard Caucasian high school bands playing it during a football game. So that tells you the impact of that song.
Oh, yeah. Wow. And let me add as well. You talked about the Ball and Parlay, but when you talk about Houston, Beaumont, or the Tri, you're basically talking about one contiguous area. And you talk about Screwed Up Clique, that's not just music. That's a culture. Now that screwed up click music, that's a whole genre of rap and culture that he helped create. I was joking, but sitting sideways, I went to an all-white Catholic males high school and they were jamming that song. Go figure. So you talking about crossover appeal and having an impact on society. That's in addition to the HBCU, he had that impact on the Texas, Louisiana, Gulf Coast area, in addition to the HBCU diaspora.
Good stuff for sure. Now, when we come back on the other side, we're going to nerd out for a minute. A couple of weeks ago, you remember the reports came out on NCAA finances, revenue and expenses. USA Today, and then you had some other reports that talked about attendance. And so there's a lot of chatter, a lot of information out there in terms of social media platforms in regards to what did this mean and what did people think? And people were picking apart different frameworks in terms of what that looks like. You had a great deep dive on the show this past Sunday, and previous to that, actually it was Monday as they were doing the Juneteenth holiday, in terms of Brian and AD. And we even touched on it last week, and I gave a homework assignment to AD Drew. He came through with the homework assignment, broke some of it down on his show. We're going to take a little deeper dive and take a different direction. And we're going to break it down into some components in this second, third segment to get into some dialogue. So this is a collaboration for AD Drew. I added some different things on there. So we're going to take various looks. We'll look at it from a SWAC perspective. We'll look at it from a MEAC perspective. We'll look at it from the independent. So we'll do it at the FCS level in regards to what it means in terms of revenue. We'll even look at it in terms of those teams that played in the championship last year. We'll look at it in terms of teams, 6 of the teams that made it to the quarterfinals in regards to what HBCU compare on average to those teams, and maybe give you some insight in regards to different ways to cut up this data and look at it to help you consider what it will take for HBCUs maybe to be more competitive in terms of non-conference games. For those the independents that are looking to participate in the FCS playoffs, what are some augmented ways to look at that? Obviously, you still have the at-large bids for the MEAC and SWAC in regards to them participating in the playoffs, but it'll give you some indications of what this looks like in terms of independent programs as we'll break down the data. Before we take the break, I did want to go into this and touch on a little bit in terms of how we broke down the data. And we'll come back on the side and touch about that a little more. We took all SWAC schools. We looked at enrollment. We looked at attendance, ticket sales, revenue, expenses, allocated dollars, percentage of allocated dollars, number of sports teams, Commissioner Cup percentage teams, Commissioner Cup, APR. We even have some more data, but those are some basic ones. And again, SWAC, MEAC, and the independent HBCU programs operating at the FCS level. Particulars will be back on the other side, and we'll get into this. We'll have some data matrix to look at it. We'll have some views that you can see, and then we're going to have some dialogue. So we'll take a break in between all this, and we'll do this for the next couple of segments. Again, we're going to take a deeper dive inside the business side of HBCU sports and see what our listeners think about it. We'll just be right back after this break.
Are you hungry for authentic Caribbean food like jerk chicken, oxtail, red snapper, shrimp, tofu, and rasta pasta? Well, find your way over to Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, 180 Auburn Avenue, right next to Royal Peacock in downtown Atlanta.
Them belly full, but we hungry.
Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, open daily from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. And on Friday and Saturday, we're open till 4 a.m. Come to Mango's and put some spice in your life.
So we've got a good thing going.
Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, 180 Auburn Avenue, right next to Royal Peacock in downtown Atlanta. For more info or directions, call 404-698-3992 or log on to mangoscaribbeanrestaurant.com. For instant coupons, text MANGOS to 313131.
Tell your mama hungry, papa hungry, brother hungry.
Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, authentic Caribbean cuisines.
Open up the door, tell your mama hungry.
T. Madden and Associates is a sophisticated and experienced law firm located in your neighborhood. We're turning injury to cash.
T. Madden and Associates obtained almost $2 million for my injury. They turned my injury to cash.
Now, we can't guarantee how much your injury is worth, but we've recovered millions for our clients. Call T. Madden and Associates at 833-PAID-123. That's 833-PAID-123.
This is Ryan Fulford. AD Drew and I are co-hosts of the BCSN SportsWrap. We talk about all things related to HBCU athletics. From the games, teams, coaches, and fan interest stories, we cover it all. You can find our shows on Facebook at BCSN SportsWrap, YouTube at MyJBN Online, and everywhere you listen to podcasts like Anchor, Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. You can also find the show on the Jericho Broadcast Network's app. Make sure to download. We look forward to you joining the conversation and being a part of the show.
Press the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they wanna law, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, AD Drew, and Brandon King, as we got the young instructor in here today to see what's on his mind, giving him a little wet appetite, give him a chance to come here and mix it up in the lab a little bit and see if he can sprinkle some knowledge on some folks in his own way, even though he sounds like he's a little concerned about Tennessee State and OVC, man. I'm in swinging it, folks.
I like that personally.
So before we get in this number, so Brandon, were you in school when FAMU and Tennessee State were playing in Atlanta? Or did you miss all that?
No, I was there. I got there in 2003, so I was still a part of that. And I was
so that's part of it. You kind of upset while you have the Southern Heritage classes, you still missing out on that. So I see what it is. You just need a little more flavor, and so you'd be excited just to get that regular. Now there's some Tennessee State fans out there. I don't want you to get beat up because some of the folks they swear by the OVC, even though they have lost in that conference for over 30 years, but that's another discussion. We'll get into
Hey, Doc, you got the bookends of the FAMU Tennessee State Atlanta Classic here because I was at the first Atlanta Classic.
Okay, that's how we're going to do it.
Yeah. Bobby Dodd Stadium, 1989.
Yeah, that's right. We just had Juneteenth and belated Juneteenth for everybody.
Happy belated Juneteenth.
Celebrating that history there. But again, we're going to break down this. We'll look at it in terms of enrollment, allocation dollars, attendance, ticket sales, revenue, and expenses, dollars allocated. Those were some of the numbers that were out there. If you recall, HBCU Nightly, Joshua Sims Sr. put out there, just took the general number, and he took out in terms of the Knight Newhouse College Athletic Database, looking at ticket sales leaders, where people really got excited. JSU had 4.6 million, and that was from this past year. We'll go a little deeper back because one of the things that's important in terms of the data that we're coming out there, so just so everybody's clear, the numbers that we're using are from 2021 to 2022 season. Again, the numbers that we're going to break down on the show are from 2021 to 2022 season. But as was stated there, just to simplify folks and get you lathered up a little bit, JSU with 4.6 million in ticket sales were fourth overall in terms of FCS. Southern, 2.13 million, was seventh overall. North Carolina A&T was 1.25 with 13th overall. Grambling at 763 was 23rd overall, fourth in terms of HBCUs. South Carolina State may surprise some folks, was 601,000, with 27th overall, but fifth in terms of HBCUs. We'll talk about the next six. Alabama A&M, 593. Texas Southern at 507 was seventh. Alabama A&M and Texas Southern were 28th and 32nd, respectively. Number 8 was North Carolina Central at 507.3, 33rd overall. Number 9 was Prairie View A&M, 484, 34th overall. And number 10 was UAPB at 433 at 37th overall. Brandon, don't worry in regards to your concern there in terms of not being those top 10. but you were number 5 overall when you looked at revenue, just overall revenue. So, there's different ways you can cut this up, where you can stick your chest out and be excited for probably the top 10 HBCU FCS programs in terms of how they looked at it. But I want to go to AD Drew that did a lot of the yeoman's work and the homework part of this. And before we kind of give you some pictures and do some cross tabulation and comparison things, I wanted to ask Drew, what was some of the things that were important to you that you wanted to look at, and why did you take certain numbers and break it down and then start doing a comparison?
Well, actually, it comes down to some of the conversations that we've been having on the show, on the various shows, as numbers have been coming out. And, we were talking about the Commissioner Cup on one of the shows. And then we started talking about if you really divide that up by the number of sports being offered, how does that affect the numbers on the Commissioner's Cup and rankings and things like that? So as all these numbers started coming out, and when people put out these reports, you got to go to the backstory on them and the back data. And when you click on those links, said, this data came from this source, if you're a stat nerd like me, you really open up and see different things. And thinking about the conversations we've had, and then I'm looking at these numbers and I'm like, what about this number? What about this number? Then how does this number affect this number? And you just keep going on, and the next thing you know, you got a big old spreadsheet. And then you figure out, okay, how do I break this down, and start coming up with graphs and everything like that. And Doc, if I was about Brandon's age and had all the time in the world like Brandon does, I would actually sat here and probably try to put together the regression analysis. I know that's over a lot of people's heads, but I think everybody on this show understands what I'm talking about, to really see if I can actually come up with a formula to see how does ticket sales or guaranteed dollars or this and that affect your Commissioner's Cup standing and your points. So that's kind of where it came from, my economic background and my curiosity as an HBCU sports fan.
Well, I like the way you think when you start talking about regression analysis. I even looked at some t-test sample sizes. But I'm really freaking everybody out. I'm not going to do all that. Let me go to you, Mike. Just in terms of the data sets, when you saw this number coming out of there and all this busy discussion on Twitter, Facebook in some areas, Instagram, what were your thoughts?
Well, to be honest, it was a lot of data points, but then I started initially putting that MBA engineering hat on and looking at the relationships, which variables had the most impact over other variables. You mentioned a couple: revenue, ticket sales, enrollment. Another column that caught my eye was percent allocated. If you look at, there's an inverse relationship between those institutions or those schools with a higher percent allocated than some of those schools with higher revenue. So you kind of wonder why. Dig deeper. Which schools also factor into this with the highest alumni base? So going to what Drew said, it just focus you or ask you to go deeper and deeper and deeper behind these numbers and see what's the direct and indirect relationships, because this is fascinating.
I'm curious, in terms of you, Brandon, just from a different perspective, just to see again, when you saw all this chatter taking place, and people may not realize, as you said earlier, you write articles on HBCU sports, and in your perspective, one of the things you look at are what are interesting stories. So I'm curious, as a columnist for HBCUsports.com, what grabbed your attention when you started seeing all this different numbers and metrics and dialogue was out there? What came to your mind?
Well, as I look at it, there's a lot of disparity. Just taking ticket sales, for instance, since that's just right in my face. But you look at that, you have obviously you could take it a couple ways. You could say there's Jackson State, and then there's everyone else, because what the 4.6 million that they have, you could pretty much take everybody else and put them within that. You've got Southern clocking in at a little over half that, but just as I'm looking at these numbers, like I said, it seems that in some cases there's halves, and then there's really have-nots. There's really a lot of disparity with a lot of the numbers. But then when I look at it, because like I don't have a fancy MBA or anything like that. I just got a little bachelor's degree, so. But
you finished, dog. That's all.
That's all right. You got it though. You got that little old degree, right? So
I graduated with a 3.3, May 7th. 9 a.m. OPC.
Wait a minute.
That's right. Talk it up.
You got the bachelor's degree, but your GPA was higher than mine. Go see. And I got two degrees.
Exactly.
Senior year, I just wanted to be done. I was like, look, I'm ready to tap out. I'm done with school. I'm just done.
So, Understood, young man.
But like just looking at this, like looking at it from another standpoint, obviously there's a lot of our schools that are below this first bar, whatever metric you want to look at. So what that says to me, there's as we used to say in the world of retail, areas of opportunity. So there's a lot of areas that we can look at and look to improve. And like I said, we can look and see, well, what can we do if, say, for instance, I'm just throwing, if I am UAPB, how can we get to, I don't know, 450, 750? What can we do? Not necessarily to get to the 2 million where, a Southern or 4.6 where a Jackson State is. Let's get to 750. Let's see, what can we do to get there? What things can we do to engage the community, to want to make them come out? What does that look like? Does that look in terms of obviously getting a better athlete to make people want to come out? So as I look at it, that's kind of where my mind went to, and looking at it, just seeing what areas where there's opportunities for growth, and there seems to be a lot of
good stuff. With that being said, before we take our next break, Eddie, Drew, as we come back on the other side, what are the first things we're going to look at and why?
Well, Brandon kind of touched on it. You talked about those ticket sales. And one of the first things I noticed that was out of whack when I saw put these numbers is the percent of ticket sales to total revenue. And when you compare that to everyone else in FCS, what does that really say? That, some of our teams are way up there, and some of our teams aren't, not even sniffing it. And when we get to the end, there's one stat that ties back into that Commissioner's Cup, Dr. Cavil, that's going to be interesting for us to look at. But we're going to hold that to the end of the final segment of this.
I like the way you think. You learn fast. Stickers will be right back out of this break, and we'll really get into the numbers and give you some data to take home and see what you think about what it means in regards to the FCS data, particularly looking at HBCU. Stickers will be right back after this second break.
Nope.
Come on, him?
Ooh, I like him.
Quick, the quicker picker-upper. Bounty picks up messes quicker, and each sheet is 2 times more absorbent, so you can use less.
He's an 8.
He's a 9.
Bounty, the quicker picker-upper.
Now, you can't live in Texas and not have a good red meat blend. Texas Cowboy Dust is designed for steak and other red meats. It's out to be my most popular spice blend, made with onions, peppers, ground mushrooms, pink salt, and other spices. Texas Cowboy Dust also goes great with chicken, pork, vegetables, and adds a restaurant quality sheen to gravies and sauces.
It's like a loop machine. All around town, people trying to get down.
Vanilla smoked sea salt seasoning is for seafood. The tarragon and fennel bring out the natural sweetness in seafood. I also use it in rice dishes, on yams, asparagus, blueberry pancakes, and believe it or not, chocolate chip cookies. Vanilla smoked sea salt adds a salty and savory component to sweet dishes that create a symphony for the tongue.
From novice to aficionado, find yourself here. High quality cigars plus personal customer service. Slow Burn is Waco's only mobile cigar lounge, featuring a meticulous, curated collection of premium cigars. Visit our website, www.slowburnwaco.com. That's www.slowburnwaco.com.
Press the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they wanna law, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with AD Drew, Mike Washington, and Brandon King. So let's get into this data. Let's get into some of the numbers. AD Drew, what is the first thing we want to look at, and why is it important?
You know, Brandon kind of talked about ticket sales and the disparity in ticket sales and the large gap. So let's look at ticket sales in the SWAC. And when you take a look at it, this is not the revenue. This is actually the percent of your revenue that comes from your ticket sales. And we see Jackson State coming in at close to 40% of their total revenue is comprised of ticket sales. And you see a couple of those that are way up there. You see Southern is way up there with a large amount of ticket sales as its revenue, along with Grambling State. Here's the thing. The FCS average is 5%. So what does that really tell us? Is Jackson State just that doggone good where they are way up there and 800% better than the average? Or is Jackson State relying too much on their ticket sales for their revenue? What does that number really mean? It's about perspective. So I'll leave it right there and let you guys kind of give you guys a perspective on it. But that was one of the first numbers that kind of stuck out at me. How far above the curve Jackson State blew the curve out the water. We'll just put it like that.
And I want everybody to notice when we talk about the percentage of that. So when you look at that and you saw the $4.6 million in terms of ticket sales, well, overall revenue for Jackson State that they bring in is $12.8 million. So of that $12.8 million, 4.6 is ticket sales. So when you say the percentage allocated, you're talking about how much of general funds does the university use. And that's why you said that they're all higher in terms of the 40% that want other universities. For example, when you look at Prairie View, they spend a similar amount of money. They spend 14.3 in terms of revenue overall, but they only generate 484 in terms of ticket sales of that year. Obviously, we're looking at 2022, right? So in terms of them, they use 75 or 70%. They allocate more money. So you can look at it two ways. You can either say, as Brandon alluded to, how can Prairie View improve in terms of increasing their ticket sales, right? Which will allow them to have more revenue Or you can look at Jackson State and say, hey, what would be Jackson State's revenue if the university decided to put more money in terms of athletics, in terms of the dollars allocated? So you have to be extremely careful in regards to just looking at revenue in itself and saying, where is that revenue coming from? Right?
Right.
Yeah.
So
And
Mike,
one thing before y'all talk about that, for ticket sales for everybody, this is across the entire athletic department. This is not just football only. Everybody needs to make sure that they understand that. So there's football, basketball. If you sell tickets for volleyball or baseball, all sports go into this number.
Great point. Go ahead, Mike.
No, my point was just going to be just the opposite. If you switch and look at percent allocated, and let's say you pick a number, a line of demarcation, 75% allocated. That means, 75% of their revenue is allocated. And you look at their ticket sales, then the question becomes, what would that team become if they were able to generate more from ticket sales? They have the capacity. So you look at Alabama A&M, 593,000 in ticket sales, 90% allocated. So you wonder if they were able to generate, twofold, 1 million, how would that help revenue? Then you go down a little further and then you see, maybe a couple of schools at 82%, Delaware State, I believe, or maybe one below it was 82%. Delaware State is 92%. So you look at those schools with high percent allocated, and then you look at their ticket sales, and you wonder if those schools across the board were able to generate more ticket sales, and thus generate more revenue. Is this an HBCU phenomenon that we're seeing, or how does this also compare outside in other D1 institutions where you have high percentage allocation with lower ticket sales?
Exactly. Brandon, I'm gonna come back to you, Drew. I want to make sure we jump everybody in there because I want you to go to your next slide and make sure we keep it moving. But Brandon, I wanted to get into this little thought process with you because I wanted to make sure we not only look at the SWAC, we look at a little bit in the MEAC and independence. Highest in the SWAC in terms of total revenue was Southern at 18 million. Now, the dollar allocated of that 18 million was 13 million, 72%. 10 years ago, I did a similar study and they were only doing 40%. So they've had a change in philosophy in terms of their administrative leadership, in terms of what they wanted to do to allocate more money towards athletics. I come to you to get outside of this because if you go into the MEAC, and obviously the private schools, Bethune-Cookman in the SWAC, Howard in the MEAC, and Hampton now in the Colonial, then in the Big South, do not have to report their numbers because of their private status. So I do want you to keep that in mind. But next to them in the MEAC, the highest amount that is spent in terms of revenue is Delaware State at 16.2 million. Similarly, A&T spends 16.3 billion. Tennessee State, Brandon, that I'm sure that you were really looking at comparing to others, is at 15.8 million. Well, one of the things that I noticed a lot of folks, particularly Tennessee folks, they were comparing themselves to other HBCUs, and they were relatively high, top 5, if you would, in terms of HBCUs. But my problem with that, I was like, but you play in the OVC, which consists of all other historically white colleges that I like to look at it. And the reason I bring that up, because A.D. Drew did a nice analysis, because he looked at the FCS mean. The FCS mean internal revenues is 17.7. The FCS median for non-football is 17.6. And I should say that was the median. The average in terms of that is different. But I also wanted to look at in terms of the playoffs, because those outside, that's a significant thing that you're wanting to participate, obviously, in, because that's one of the measures you had. Well, the two teams that played for the championship this last year, South Dakota State, North Dakota State, in 22 and 21, if you would, their total revenue was $25.5 million. It's almost $10 million more.
Yep.
Than the HBCU average, if you would. North Dakota State at $29.2 million. Right? If you back it up and look at the public schools that made it to the Final Eight, I didn't look at the Final Four because two of the teams were private, so you had the same teams that ultimately made it to the championship. But if you look at the Final Eight, you had 6 programs: South Dakota State, North Dakota State, Delaware, New Hampshire, Montana, and southeastern Louisiana. Look at their revenue. 25.5, as I told you, 29.2. For Delaware, it was $40 million. New Hampshire was $33 million.
Houston State,
Montana was
million.
$28.9 million.
Yeah.
And the outlier was Southeast Louisiana with $15 million. The average championship games was 27.4. The Final 8 of the FCSN tournament was 28.8. So I'm always like, how are you going to seriously make a run at the playoffs and be competitive in the OVC, the Big South, if you would, Colonial now in terms of Hampton, specifically A&T, because we can look at the public institutions, when you're nearly $10 million behind of what they're spending in their revenue. What are your thoughts when you hear that number, Brent?
Well, I think it's really eye-opening. It shows that, how far behind the 8 ball in a lot of ways Tennessee State is. And I think to kind of come back to what you said a bit earlier, because granted, like I said earlier, there are some TSU OVC diehards that will beat me up for saying this. But there's a fair amount of the TSU fan base, if you will, that still look at us like, you know how maybe when you got in trouble and you had to sit inside and you could look out in the window and see all your friends playing and having fun. That's kind of how some of them look at the OVC. Like, we're an HBCU over here with playing with the OVC, but we look out the window and we see Southern and Grambling playing kickball, and we want to be out there too. So when we look at these numbers, we're 5th, we're 6th. Well, it looks good, but forgetting about the sandbox that we're in, I mean, we're a little fish, and say that when you're operating at almost a $10 million deficit, that's the reason why, if we're speaking on football, we haven't won the OVC since 1998 and have only been competitive if we're keeping it all the way 100 a handful of years. Yeah. And particularly, I mean, looking at this year, the conference from a football perspective was mediocre at best. So, well, wow.
No, I think you're serious when you say that. You're not saying it just to throw rocks. But some of the stronger teams that have finished over the last years in the first place have left the conference, which you're talking about.
Exactly.
In terms of expansion. And one of the expansion teams was a Division II program, and it wasn't very well at the Division II level, and they're moving up. It's not to say that teams can't get better, but to your point, the number of teams that made the OVC playoffs was just the automatic bid. There were some years where OVC would get multiple players in the OVC into the tournament. So that gives you some indication of what you're saying in regards to the strength that everybody likes to holler at when you talk about SWAC and MEAC, where the OVC in this case had the same issue, much like the Big South, when you can only get one team in. So I did want to get into this last break, but before you do that, I did want to come back to Drew and point out another data point and a metric that you can pull up, that Roy can pull up and show us, as we'll come back on the other side and actually discuss it.
All right. Let's say if Roy goes to number 7,
go ahead and start discussing it.
All right, there we go. That's a breakdown of the revenue for the various schools and where everybody's how they get their pot of money. Now, for this, I took out the allocation. I took out what the state allocates to you. And as you can see, going back, picking on Jackson State, as you can see how much of their department's revenue comes from ticket sales, which is the blue line, compared to everything else. Number 2 is their game guarantees. Interesting. Look at the orange one. Those are how much money these institutions are getting off of game guarantees. And how many of them have the game guarantee as their major revenue source, such as, I hate to pick on you, Doc, Texas Southern and Prairie View. Game guarantees were their biggest revenue source outside of the allocation that they get from the institution. Alcorn, Alabama A&M, same thing. Southern, same thing, which shows how much these people are relying on these game guarantees. Here's the asterisk to that, everybody. Classics are included in this game guarantee. This is not all just the beatdown games. The classics, the money that you get paid guaranteed to go to a classic, such as Southern going to the Bayou Classic, is included in that orange graph. So once again, you have to take it
State Fair Classic. Great point.
Yeah, you have to take it with a grain of salt to make sure you understand what's behind the numbers. It's not all bad when you look at it, when you consider that portion of it.
Great stuff.
What is other revenue?
That's everything that wasn't categorized as far as ticket sales, game guarantees was another one. Your payout from your the gray line is, if you put that back up for a second, Roy, the gray line is the money that you get from your playoffs. Like if like Texas Southern won the basketball tournament that year, that would be money that's in that gray line. The money that you get from the conference Celebration Bowl money, the media contract, ESPN, because I don't believe HBCU Go wasn't around for this one. So that would be that one. And the yellow line is donor, is how much you're getting from your donors in that particular year.
Gotcha.
Everything else that they fall in one of those 4 categories went into other, just to make it simple.
And you're right. This is the first year, 2022, 2023, when you'll start seeing that money associated with HBCU Go revenue. It kicked in and paid out at the end of the year. So those checks that SWAC coaches came back, my understanding, pretty much the lowest was $1 million plus for each institution. Some institutions got as high as $2 million in terms of return dollars from the conference, to give you an indication of that next level of what the revenue from HBCU Go, and it should increase every year up to the length of the contract with HBCU Go. So the revenue payout for SWAC schools will increase significantly over the next 10 years. That is prior to any new contract that will be done with ESPN, or if they go to market, whoever else bids on the first rights for the SWAC sports. So there's some healthy stuff going on. So it's going to be interesting to look at this year over year, as we start looking at longitudinal from this point on, start looking at this data each year. Other thing that was said that I thought was interesting that was put out here, note Dakota State has a very large fan base and their games are almost always sold out, and they travel well. Great point made by Silas. And one of the things that's interesting is when you look at North Dakota State, they're in North Dakota, and yes, they have a smaller state population, but they are the state institution along with North Dakota. So it makes sense. Similar like you look at Texas A&M being state institutions, and they are able to galvanize the state fans beyond those alumni that actually went to the institution. You see a similar habit. When you start looking at enrollment, which is something we'll come back on the other side and talk about, it gives you a different comparison in regards to what they're able to allocate in terms of dollar amounts. because as Drew said, it's not necessarily what the state gives to you, because many people know most states, particularly Texas, Florida, do not allow public institutions to use state funds towards allocation of athletics, but your institution has general funds, and a lot of that percentage allocated, dollar allocated, comes from that general fund in terms of how they want to operate their athletics. Stick with us. We'll be right back after this last break. We'll come back and have our last segment as we'll push it forward and give you a couple of final slides in regards to how this aggregates out in multiple ways to look at it, and get some final comments to everybody here. Great comments coming in. Appreciate you all, and hope you get a little deeper dive in terms of the number of metrics. We'll come back maybe in a week to give you even some more different stuff to get you through this down period as we get into football, but give you an understanding of why you have to be careful about just taking general numbers and making a declarative statement of the health of your sports program. Stickers will be right back after this break on the other side.
It's never too early to plant the seed, to share the tradition, and instill a sense of pride in your HBCU with your little ones. HBCU Pride and Joy Children's Boutique helps you share your school spirit with a wide selection of adorable kids apparel and accessories officially licensed from your favorite HBCU. Visit hbcupridejoy.com and follow us on all social media at HBCU Pride Joy on Facebook and Twitter.
Stride K-12 powered schools are ready to put over 20 years of being a leader in online education to work for you. Dive into curriculum design for the online classroom. Team up with state-certified teachers trained in virtual instruction. Take control of your child's education journey. Discover the power of personalized learning with a leader experienced in preparing kids for a future they can be excited about. Take charge. Stride K-12. Enroll now for the fall.
You're looking press the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they want a lot, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Bill with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. I hope you're enjoying as we go into the data analytics metrics of really taking you inside the numbers of HBCU athletic programs and resources. We talked about a couple of weeks ago, we gave you the top 6 HBCU athletic directors, VP of athletics, in regards to who was making it work. And now we're going to take you into numbers and give you some backstories. We gave you metrics, how we come up with that list, and let you know the importance of building your programs and the relationships that you had to have, as we had Lynn Thompson talk about the importance of an AD, VP of athletics, not only being able to be measured by those 5-6 outcomes, but how do they have a relationship with the board of regents, the presidents, CFO, and then the community in regards to generating the revenue numbers that you see here. So very important. Before we get back into it, I did want to read this, inviting first-year teachers or current teachers interested in new approaches to pedagogy. Check out the site, mybcsn.net/watch/stride. Once you load the site, click the Stride logo at the top or scroll down to where it says Teacher Appreciation. This will take you to the sign up page. Then choose if you are a new teacher or a current teacher. There are 2 different programs, both are free, which vary in length based on your schedule. One last item, sign up. Quote, how would you hear about us? And click on BCSN announcement. Make sure you check out mybcsn.net/watch/stride for those teachers out there to get some more information in terms of how you improve your pedagogy. With that being said, AD Drew, what are some of the final points that you want to make sure people look at and take away as they get into the numbers and we give them their homework assignment in terms of going back and doing stuff after the show?
The next couple of sets are going to be the most important things that I picked up. You guys see all the data I presented, so you may have picked up something different. Got to give 2 quick definitions, Dr. Cavil, for the layperson who's not a stat nerd like we are. There's the mean, or what common people call the average, which is you take all the numbers, You sum them up, and you divide that by the total. So if you have 100 units, and you've got 10 people, you divide it by 10, and you get an average of 10. All right. Then there's what in the statistical field we call the median. That's when you put all the numbers in a row from smallest to largest, and you look and see what number is in the middle. So that may not be that same 10. You may have a bunch of 9s and 8s, and then you have a 20 out there which skews it, and you have a 0 which skews it. So your median may be a number such as 8. And then, of course, there's the last one, and we didn't get into it, which is the bold, which would work on this, which is the number that would occur most. But I'm getting too analytical right now. But that's going to help us as we look at this next one, which is going to be, and this inspiration came from you, Dr. Cavil. How much does all this stuff cost us? How much does it cost us per sport to compete? Well, in the SWAC, the average cost per sport is about $735,000. So when you think about that, the average cost is $735,000. How many teams are above the average? Well, statistically saying there's got to be half. But here's the thing. 2 teams in the SWAC, 2 institutions in the SWAC are spending over $1 million per sport. Remember, the average is 734.
Yep.
Those 2 teams spending over $1 million are Prairie View and Southern. Let's flip that though, everybody. Let's look at the 2 teams on the bottom. Alcorn and Valley. What do those 2 schools have in common, everybody? They're in the state of Mississippi, which goes to show you, if Jackson State does not get those ticket sales that we were talking about when we began this conversation, they would probably be down there at the bottom with those 2 institutions. That was the one thing that stuck out about this. And if Roy would quickly show the BAC and the independent graphic, just so everybody can see the difference with those. Your BAC average, just for everybody, is $667,000, and between the 2 schools that are independent, it was $663,000. I'll leave right there, let you guys comment before I give out my closing slide.
Great stuff. Mike, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah. AD, let me tell you, this is some great stuff, brother. I was going where you were. I was going to take a slight spin. I was looking at the cost of sport. And then you look at those teams that are above $1 million. You see Prairie View and Southern. Then you look at the schools with the highest revenue. And then you look at one more data point. Who's winning championships the last 10 years? And why are they? So you got, JSU been competitive. All right. You look at where is FAMU on here and where they are. You've got A&T, which is right at that 1 million mark. So the question I have is there in like the SWAC or let's say the HBCU diaspora, a minimal mark, if you were able to maximize ticket sales, that you could be expedient with your cost per sport and still be competitive. That's kind of where I was going with this.
That's where you look.
That's a good point.
What I was wanting us and our viewers to pick up on is you could actually create an analysis to tell you what you need to be in terms of your spending to be at the top of your conference. So Brandon, again, I'm going to come to you, and this is kind of a follow-up, which means in a lot of ways, North Carolina A&T, Tennessee State, obviously Hampton, but we can look at those 2 in terms of public, meaning that you're going to have to increase your money 2 or 3 times, probably 2.5 times. North Carolina A&T, 3.5 times to be competitive, which means you're putting the bulk of that competitiveness either on your students, if you're talking about allocated funds, in terms of student fees and ticket sales from fans and alumni, or you're going to need to find significant revenue to catch up just to be competitive.
Yeah.
When you hear that, Brandon, what is that? Where do you think you are in terms of making those moves? You don't have to be very robust on this, but just a quick thought process in terms of how did that make you feel when you hear that?
Couple things. One, it shows that to win, it's not cheap. And you have to, and it kind of goes to your leadership, your administration, and how much of an onus or focus they're putting on putting out a quality athletic program. And, you know, the numbers kind of bear that self out. It seems like those that are geared toward that and are willing to put those resources out there and look for ways to build those resources. And then it's showing itself on the field, on the court. And those that are, you know, trying to cut corners or let me not say that, or have certain other constraints that may affect their ability to do that, then, you know, they're obviously struggling as well. So for me, looking at these numbers, like I said, commitment to athletics, and then wherever how your school, your administration, your athletic department leadership, you know, how they feel about sports. So I
mean, you hit it on there. There's no way that you can dance around it. I mean, that's important because people are wanting to win, but you have to decide that you're going to pay at a certain level to win. And you got to be careful. If you only do it in one sport, you might get the bang for that sport, but what is it going to mean to your other sports as well? You got to do it across the board if you want to have a overall healthy program. So it's going to be fascinating to kind of watch again as we stratify this. We do a longitudinal study and do this year after year. It's going to be fascinating. Let me go back to you, 80 Drew, as you tie this in a nice bow. I wanted to give some numbers that I added on there that we talked about, but was not able to send back to you, as I'm sure you're going to do it in a great way. I wanted people to realize, and I'm talking about all 12 teams, when we look at enrollment, the highest enrollment in the SWAC, and this is just undergraduate numbers, is Prairie View at 8,444, which helps them with the dollar allocated. I want to make that clear. What helps Prairie View is the fact that they have a growing enrollment.
Yep.
8,000. Second is FAMU at 7,000. The average in the SWAC in terms of enrollment is 4,500, 4,587 to be exact. And if you look at that in terms of enrollment per allocated dollars, that's 1.6 thousand, almost 1,700. In the MEAC, in terms of enrollment, highest enrollment there is Howard at 8,964. Again, this is undergraduate enrollment only, almost 9,000 students. But in terms of a public institution, it's Morgan State at 7,000. Their average is 4,629 students. But in terms of allocated dollars, they're doing 2,580. Again, let's compare this to the two public institutions. Obviously, A&T, undergraduate enrollment, this is 2021 numbers, is 11,596. Tennessee State is 6,035. Average, when you include Hampton, is 6,946, almost 7,000. They're doing 1.5 or 1,561 per allocated dollars. Again, you look at that across the peers, you talk about average attendance for the championship, South Dakota State, North Dakota State, 10,000 students. So that game in terms of understanding the value of enrollment. But I want to make sure clear, you got to get your enrollment up. But to get your enrollment up, as we see last year, as we have an interest in HBCUs, you also have to have the bedrooms. You have to have the beds. And unfortunately, a lot of that money comes from the state. So there's a state component about this that's political that we need to understand, that there is some hand tied with our leadership and understanding how to make all this work. 80 Drew, take it away and close it out, as hopefully we've given some significant numbers for people to consider. But I know you have a couple of slides that you want to show that really ties this in a nice bow.
We're going to go to 13, then 14. Too bad couldn't pull this one out for the independents, but let's look at the Commissioner's Cup. You know, that's what you play for in the SWAC. And then the MEAC is called the All Sports Championship. We'll come back to the All Sports, to the MEAC in just a moment. In 21-22, Prairie View won the Commissioner's Cup with 167 points. I'm going to just give you the top four. Alabama State was number 2, 146.5 points. Texas Southern was 3, 121.5 points. And Southern was 4 at 119 points. The average amount of points, when you divide your budget, how much you spent by your score in the Commissioner's Cup, how many points you earned in the Commissioner's Cup, on average, it costs you $109,000 per point in the SWAC. Well, look at the teams above that average. Alabama State, over $120,000. Let's see, Alabama State, $122,000. Texas Southern, right at the average, $109,000. Southern, $156,000. And Prairie View, $112,000. Like y'all just said, you have to pay to play. Those teams that spent at the average or above had a good chance of winning the SWAC Commissioner's Cup. Those who did not, didn't. Poor Alabama A&M did not invest their money good because they spent more money than anybody and was way below the Mendoza line. And it's the same thing in the MEAC. Those who paid the money for the all sports trophy in the MEAC, it was $155,000 was your average. And I'm going to try to be quick with this. The team who won the all sports trophy that year was Howard with 103 points. Obviously, we can't look at Howard, so we have to go to the next team, which is Norfolk with 93 points. As you see, they are above the average. And coming in at number 3 in the MEAC was Morgan State this particular year. And that's combining men's and women's. And as you can see, those are the teams that are way above the average.
Good stuff. Great reports. Go back and check out the show from Monday for Brian and AD. They take another dive. Great slides they have near the end of that presentation that breaks down the revenue distribution of the SWAC, the MEAC, and the independents in regards to looking at other revenue, donor, NCAA, conference media, money, game guarantees, dollars allocated in ticket sales. It gives you a great indication of where various institutions are looking at in terms of what that dollar is. So I hope you enjoyed this breakdown to give you some indication. I know it was heavy in terms of the data, but sometimes you got to go do your homework and you just got to really break down the numbers and look at it in such a way that you get a better understanding in terms of athletics. This also gives you a different viewpoint in regards just what is the challenge in the depth of how you have to really understand the metrics associated with running a top level athletic program. With that, I want to say thanks. Thank you for listening to Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Make sure you share our podcast with your friends and colleagues. I am Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, the Dean of HBCU Sports, coming from inside the lab in the College of HBCU Sports with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Now you see why I got my first nickname, the Data Doctor. But you see A.D. Drew, as well as Mike Washington and Brandon King come in understanding in terms of those data points and economic frameworks, and Brandon holding his end of the bargain up very well, even though he kidded us a little bit. You did well, Brandon, in regards to providing a perspective in terms of just analytics, in terms of writing the analysis of what are your thoughts when you hear these numbers. And that's important to make sure we bring to the table as well. Again, I want to thank you for listening to Dr. Bill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 o'clock. We look forward to next week as we discuss the latest news in the lab. We start getting to the point where we can give you some updates, and we'll look at the rankings coming up really quick. We'll look at Division II NIA programs, look at the top 21 teams, tell you where we think they are standing coming into the season. We'll have a flashback and tell you how wrong or right we were. We'll also do it at the FCS level, where we know we have a lot of interest to see when we'll look at those 21 teams, which means in that level we'll get to see all FCS 21. But follow me, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. That's DRKENYATTACAVIL. Again, that's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at DRKENYATTACAVIL. Inside the HBCU Sports Lab 1 on Twitter. Facebook and YouTube is Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Make sure you check out Brian and AD every Sunday, sometimes on Monday. Just check them out because they moved a little bit in terms of the summertime in regards to SportsWrap. They'll keep you on the lookout as they bring extended show. We might even do a guest on there and do an even more extensive breakdown on their show when we talk about it. Make sure you check out Brandon King, Sneaker King. Also his articles at HBCUsports.com as he gives it to you. And as Mike does his data analytics and data points and matrix as he likes to do as he does his stuff. Look for them, those Prairie View fans out there with 1876 Sports and Culture as they bring that back shortly as they get ready for the fall season to give you an update on Prairie View news. O&G Strike Zone as they do it every Wednesday. Obviously, Carlos Brown this Saturday as he gives you the latest news of what's going on in Southern and HBCU landscape in terms of what he thinks. SWAC and goes outside of it and talks about some pro sports, especially his favorite Miami Heat. Didn't quite get it done, but they made a hell of a run. Shout out to Carlos Brown in terms of his Miami Heat. With that being said, dream big, continue to move forward. We'll talk with you soon. Mike?
Of course.
Drew?
Travel light, everybody. Lecture.
Brandon?
Dismiss.
You on it, brother?